Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order this school committee meeting for February 12th, 2024. Please stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Just have the old one.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Kate.
Kathleen Amaral,
Here.
Chris Oliver,
Here.
Elizabeth Coughlin, Shannon Jenkins,
Here.
John Nunes.
Yep.
Just want to make a note that to please silence your phones and laptops if you can. I just did mine. The public is able to access this meeting via a live stream at www.youtube.com/DHS Media. It is also being recorded to be rebroadcast on DCTV channels 9 on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 5, Friday 6 a.m., Saturday at 8 a.m., and Sunday at 2 p.m., as well as through Channel 18 on Mondays and Saturdays at noon and Thursdays at 3. And without further ado, I will begin our meeting with public comment. So if anyone wishes to comment on any item that is on our agenda, please step up to the podium and please state your name before you make your comments. Don't all run. Looks like that's a no.
Not all yellow.
And so it looks like we do not expect a student rep this evening.
That's right. She could
Okay.
this evening.
No worries.
Lots on her plate.
Yes, as we've lots and lots, and so good for her, and no worries with that. So I will, next, I will entertain a motion to approve our minutes. We have both the regular and executive session minutes for January 22nd.
Madam Chair, make a motion, we approve the regular session minutes of January 24th.
Second.
That's 22nd.
It's the 22nd, yes. It says 24th on the agenda,
24th,
but it was the
yeah,
22nd.
That's all right, listen, I got
Yes.
22nd.
Yep.
That's okay.
I'm all right, it's a
So we have a
We're
motion,
all-
we have a
yeah.
second by Mr. Oliver.
Yes.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimous.
Madam Chair, make a motion, we approve the executive session minutes of January 22nd, 2024, and hold them until the matter for which they were completed is complete.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Nunes, a second by Dr. Jenkins. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0, unanimous. Tries my computer.
Can I
Okay.
do the 29th?
So we have consent agenda. I'm going to turn it over to Dr.
did
Saban
20th.
McGuire.
No,
Did we do
moved
the
to 29th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion that we approve the regular session minutes from January 29th.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Jenkins, a second by Ms. Coughlin. Any discussion on those minutes, regular session minutes of January 29th? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0, unanimous. Now I'll move it to the consent agenda items. Dr. Saban McGuire?
Great. As you can see on the consent agenda, we have a couple of exciting events coming up that our students will be participating in. All with our Dartmouth High School students. We have 2 world championship competitions, one for indoor percussion and one for varsity winter guard, and that's going to be happening in April of 2024, which is not too far away now. And then the other significant event for our students is that a group of our students will be attending the MASC Annual Spring Conference. And that's really an exciting opportunity for our students like yourselves and myself. We got to experience the MASC conference in the fall, and this one is geared toward our students. So this offers them an exciting opportunity to be really involved in civic engagement. I know that Mr. Shea is here, and if you have any questions about any one of those three, he's happy to answer any of your questions.
Madam Chair, make a motion, we approve the 3 consent agenda items, the indoor percussion to WGI World Championships in April, the varsity winter guard also to WGI World Championships in April, and the high school student council MASC annual spring conference in March.
Excellent.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Nunes. We have a second by Bess Coughlin. Any discussion? Mr. Oliver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my only question, and this is for maybe Mr. Shea or anyone on the board here, is this the first year? I don't remember approving the MASC
We have not.
in the past.
We have not.
So is
since
this the first
I've
year
been
we're
here.
doing it?
That I know of.
Okay,
yeah, since
great.
I've been here, yeah. So our student council was really excited about it. So we're sending 4 officers, or 5 officers, 4 seniors and a junior.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. No, that was my only question, and as always, best of luck to the other groups.
Yep.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Any other questions or comments? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So we have a motion by Mr. Nunes. We have that, was it Bess for the second?
Bess.
Yep, Bess. Without any other discussion to be had, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously, 5-0. Next, I'm also going to turn it over. We have old business. We're going to have a discussion around the fiscal 25 budget update. Dr. Saber
Yep,
McGuire.
and again, before I just turn it right over to Mr. Kiley, I think it's important to preface our update this evening with some caution. I mean, although we have to be optimistic, and at the same time, we have to acknowledge the fact that our budget will, in fact, be impacted by the decrease in the aid in local aid. So I'm going to turn it right over to Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Dr. Saber McGuire. So, we've had a lot of budget discussion up until this point, obviously. What we're doing right now is we're working to identify areas to consider so that we can present at our next school committee meeting on March 11th a reduced budget from 6%, where we originally were, down to 3%. So we have to reduce that budget by $1.5 million. We know that school choice is going to play a role in that reduction, but we're finding that we need to pay attention to a variety of factors in terms of bridging the gap. So on March 11th, we will present to you our plan for fiscal year 25. It'll be the 3% budget. And then on March 25th, hopefully, we can hold the public budget hearing. And then April 8th would be a proposed date to vote, to have the school committee vote for the budget. Obviously, we can have discussion and dialogue at any of those meetings regarding the budget, but that's what we're working on right now, meeting with principals and their staffs, so that's where we are with it.
Any comments, questions? Mr. Oliver?
Thank you, Mrs. Amaral. I guess my only question for you, Mr. Kiley, is with the school choice playing, it being a factor after our vote to use it to help bridge the gap, do we have any idea of the FTEs that we're looking to cut at this time, or is that you would like to hold off till our next meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have a presentation at the next meeting with all the details. So everything will be transparent at that point, and we'll have recommendations. Obviously, we've had to change gears throughout this budget process a couple of times, and are in the process of doing that. We want to do it right, so we didn't want to rush it tonight. We still need to work with the schools and identify areas. But it's safe to say that while school choice will be utilized to bridge the gap, it's not the only thing that we're going to propose. So we need to do our due diligence and be cautious and obviously, think about the future here. So we're in the midst of that, putting a plan together for you.
Is it too early to speculate, or is it safe to say that we can expect some amount of pink slips?
I think that what our focus is going to be is to attempt to make reductions based on attrition.
Okay.
However, it's not necessarily true that that will be the overall solution. I mean, there may be a need to look beyond that. And that's, if you're going to do that, you have to be very careful about, the decisions you're making, and we want to make sure that you understand what the impact of those decisions will be. So that's our plan to present, almost a month from now, but with March 11th, but is to have that all for you so you clearly understand the impact of what we're going to propose.
Well, thank you,
And what we're going to move into school choice, which I think is an important decision as well. What gets shifted there.
Right.
So.
Agreed. Well, thank you for that, and I will certainly hold off on any further questions till next month.
I saw Mr. Nunes.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so now I'm totally confused, which I know sometimes doesn't take much. But when we had the joint meeting with the Select Board and the FinCom, there was $1.5 million gap.
Yep.
And we said, we went back to our meeting and we funded that with school choice money, much to everybody's one-time use, et cetera, type of deal. What has changed? I'm missing something here.
No, I don't think you're missing anything. I think you're right that is what the course of action that took place. However, I do think that there were items in our original budget proposal that were then added back into the budget for the purposes of looking at it from an override perspective, potentially, that never, came to fruition. And so we still need to do our due diligence in terms of looking critically at our operation. The school choice money, I'm glad we saved it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be around forever. And I do think that we need to be cautious as to, what we can and can't do moving forward in terms of making decisions. I don't think that the long-term future of our budget, I don't think it makes sense to just fund all 1.525 million of what was on the table at that January 8th meeting. I don't think that necessarily is going to be the plan that we're going to present to you, because I think we need to think critically about our operation. And
Okay.
Would it be worthwhile? I'm sorry. Are you?
No, go ahead. I got another, but go ahead, because I'm going to change gears.
Would it be worthwhile to convene a meeting of the budget subcommittee?
Yeah.
To seek maybe our input?
we'd be happy to do that. That would be a great idea.
That's a great idea, yep.
Yeah, we'll reach out with some dates, potential dates, and see
Before
what
the-
we can pull
Yes.
Before the
together.
next full committee meeting. I think that would be,
Yep.
at least educate
idea.
me a little bit.
Yep,
Yep.
we will do so.
Dr. Jenkins, and then back to Mr. Nunes.
So I think we have to be careful here too, because to John's question about the 1.5 million, it now looks like we asked for 1.5 million and we didn't get it, and now we're like, oh, well, actually, we don't quite need 1.5 million. So I think as we make choices about what's coming back out of the budget, we need to be really clear about what the implications of that are, because otherwise it looks like we are asking for things we don't need. I know the reductions that we're talking about will create some pinch, and I think we have to be honest with that. Otherwise, we sort of lose our credibility as we start to think about an override in the community.
Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, exactly. I want to, still in the budget, but I want to shift gears a little bit and go back to the update that Dr. Saber Maguire gave us Friday. The crossing guards are going? What am I missing?
Well, it's not the crossing guards, it's that we met with the police department, we met with the chief, and what we're losing is the traffic director. And that's because the police department can't fill the position. And that director currently, you'll see that that person is outside of the middle school and outside of the Quinn School. And so that was basically, I think they were down to their last traffic director. And that person now, they're unable to fill that position. And so we're working very closely with the middle school and obviously with the Quinn School admin team to make sure that we have a plan in place to mitigate losing those really important, that person is really important to directing traffic in the morning and the afternoon.
So correct me if I'm not trying
That's
to...
not about money, though.
No, I'm not trying to mince words here. Traffic supervisor, crossing, the people that are outside directing the traffic to let the buses and the pedestrians go across.
It's
The
not a
guy's out.
sworn-in officer. It's not an, is it an officer? or-
Not. And
It's a traffic supervisor who's
That's
a
it,
trained
title. Okay.
employee of, by the police department, but is not a police officer.
Right.
We used to have 4 of them. They've been unable to fill them. And the last one is going to take another position with the police department. And unfortunately, this week will be the last week that person will be on duty. If anybody wants a job, we'd be happy to point them in the right direction to go talk to the police department about a potential position. But unfortunately, like many jobs, it's really impossible to find people right now. So we've worked with, as Dr. Sabe McGuire said, we've worked with the police department, with the middle school and the Quinn School to try and identify, potential mitigating factors that we could help with, such as offering transportation to kids who are currently walking to the middle school from south of Hawthorne Street. So, and that will all be communicated directly to the families impacted and in general to the middle school community. The Quinn School doesn't have unsupervised kids walking, but there's a lot of people that walk and cross there.
And get picked up.
We've expressed our concerns regarding that. I know the police department is certainly going to approach it from a police officer perspective in terms of enforcement, but in terms of having somebody there at this point,
Okay.
it doesn't appear that will be the case.
So, can I just, perhaps this could be passed along to the police. I mean, I'm thinking about it like as a parent, right? Those are the times you have to be there when you're getting your kid. I don't wonder if the police have not reached out to UMass Dartmouth. There are students who are always looking for jobs, and they might be more flexible in terms of, they may be available in the morning and in the afternoon. And I do know we have a large crime and justice studies department. Those are students who are looking to get into work, typically in law enforcement. So, to have that on their resume as they go look for a job, that might be a good place. They're welcome to contact me. But if you could pass that along, we could see maybe if we could get that posted there and see if we can't, find someone, to do that work.
Okay. No, I'm good.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And on to long-term capital planning.
Long-term capital planning, do you remember those words? Long-term capital planning, seems like it was a lifetime ago that we talked about long-term capital planning, but we have been actively working
Was
toward continuing to keep long-term planning as a priority for the school district. And as you know, Mr. Kiley serves on the long-term capital planning committee, and we just want to update the public as to where we are with that and start thinking about next steps, because we do need to continue to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saban McGuire. So, and thank you all for the opportunity to sort of renew the discussion that we've had. I prepared a presentation. I don't intend to go through all the slides in detail because they're repetitive based on what we've already presented to you for the most part, although there are some changes that I'll highlight as we go. So, to review the process, really, I don't know if I said this before, but I think it's important to understand that long-term planning has been going on for a number of years. You know, that the school department and committee have been a part of that for quite a number of years. And, you know, really the modern era of long-term planning dates back to the MSBA site visits in 2016, and numerous steps, you know, have been taken since then. So this is not something brand new, no new ideas here, really. I think the difference is that we're finally at the point where the town is prepared to at least publish some sort of plan. And I think that our role in that is that we need to provide them some guidance as to priorities and projects that are need to be on their radar. So that's, you know, what we're trying to accomplish with this process. I think it's also important to note that the plan's not set in stone. You know, this is going to be a flexible document. Anytime you're planning, I mean, geez, you're planning 1 year ahead, it needs to be flexible, right? But if you're planning 40 years ahead, it needs to be a flexible, you know, plan. And I think that everyone understands that, and that this is some sort of, it's essentially a framework that will be able to, you know, be transparent and enlighten the community as to what the needs are of the community. So, you know, I think that that's sort of setting the stage for where we are right now. The goals, we've reviewed these before. I'll just highlight, you know, obviously we want an appropriate learning environment for kids. That's our number one, you know, goal, and you know, quality learning for all. You know, we need a building to be able to do that. And I don't think we're in the best position. Because, again, you know, 72, without factoring in this building, the new building, 22 years old now, you know, 72 years is our average building. So, you know, I don't think that places us in the best position to educate kids. But I do think we do the best we can with what we have. So we had presented some options, and the three options we presented aren't the only options. There's other options, and these were things to think about. Option A was to replace Dartmouth Middle School with a high school, and then tackle the 3 elementary schools in some order, with Potter and DeMello being first, and then the Quinn School third. Option B was to approach the elementary schools first, then a new middle school, and then the Quinn School final. And option C was to really look at the middle school first, and then 3 elementary schools, so replace the middle school. And interesting, so we've had some discussion with the Mass School Building Authority on this. What the recommendation that they're giving us is, when we're ready to present a statement of interest to them, tell them that we are going to replace the middle school. They said it is not necessary for us to decide at the moment whether the building is a high school, whether the building has grades 5 through 8, or whether it's 6 through 8, or 9 through 12. All of that can be part of the feasibility study process working with the MSBA. So what we would be doing is expressing our interest of why that building needs to be replaced. And I think we can easily, you know, justify that. But offer that the community is interested in looking at options. in terms of our intent for the project, looking at options to consider for the community. So I found that to be quite helpful because it sort of places us in A and C are kind of the same thing now.
Right.
And, you know, it's great to have discussion, but it's not necessary for us to decide right now that. Or to decide 5 through 8 so the Cushman School could be closed. Like, we don't have to do that today. So just something to consider. That's pretty new information, like today. Talking with the MSBA, so that's why I didn't really change the presentation. But I was very, very grateful for their insight on that, for sure. We did a comparison of options and talked about the different things that I mean, this was our thoughts, in terms of the impact on students and, whether looking at a high school and middle school versus an elementary school would impact more students initially with the first project, and, talked about the location in town and placing a new building in the center of town, and some of the different, different factors that we considered to be positives or negatives too in terms of expense. Be happy to revisit any of this stuff as we go. This is a new slide. So looking at timelines, and this probably could have changed based on my discussion today a little bit too, but it's generally pretty close. So the high school roof can't go to the MSBA yet. So it doesn't meet the requirement until 2026. So it was installed in 2001. It has to be 25 years old before they'll consider the project. They just have too many roofs on their list, so they can't. It's an arbitrary number, but it's their rule at the moment, based on the volume of statements of interest that they've received. So with that said, we've got to wait a little bit longer before we have a major project on the high school roof. A new school, as a suggestion, could be applied for in the next few years. The process itself can take 5 years. So, if you apply for that next year or the year after, it's a ways out before you're going to have a new building. We're just talking about the possibilities for a feasibility study and determining what building you build in terms of the grade structure and everything. That could probably take a year, before you iron everything out and then get the town meeting votes that are necessary. We only have 2 town meetings. It's a process that's going to take some time, so we have to be aware of that and think of that. Then if we were to follow up with a second school 5 or 10 years out from, that would be a logical progression of events. This is a little ambitious for sure, but then a third school maybe 15 to 20 years out. That, depending on whether you're talking about starting with elementaries or starting with a middle school, or it would take a bit to accomplish our goals, obviously, and then the final school 20 to 30 years out. So it's a long haul, and it might very well be longer than this. This is sort of an ambitious timeline. So we have to consider that when we're talking about 1955, 1956, even 1967 as the ages of the four buildings that we're really focused on. 30 years out before you start, that's a lot of time to keep that building in top condition. So something to consider for sure. We had talked about this briefly. I think it is important to keep in mind that the stadium should be addressed somehow. It would be irresponsible not to, and it will get to the point at some point where we're going to be, the water infiltration in the building is going to become a bigger problem that, we won't be an easy fix. Not that it's an easy fix, but it'll be much more difficult. situation if that's not addressed at some point. So I do think that needs to happen. A Dartmouth High School renovation, well, if you're talking about a 40-year plan, and this building's 20 years old, I mean, in 40 years from now, I think within that scope, there's got to be something else done to this building. I don't think it's necessarily true that we can just this will be all set, no problems outside of a roof. That's not realistic. And then all the implications of if we don't do this, or if it takes us too long to do this, what do we do with our systems, with the HVAC, with roofing systems are going to come up again and need to be replaced. Like I've been a part of all of the roof projects here, and so 5 buildings, and they should be 30-year roofs, but some of those are now like 13 years old. So that's going to be in the scope of this, So then we've got to consider all those things. Windows, like at the Potter and DeMello, if it was going to be a long-term wait before we tackle those buildings, those should be done. There's a lot of considerations to factor into this process. So next steps. Obviously, your discussion, your questions, that's all critical. The thing that I think we need to do is figure out some priority, because I think we need to give some information and guidance to that long-term capital planning committee. So my hope would be that we can have some discussion tonight and see if there's some consensus that could help give direction, and I could relay that to that group. Again, doesn't need to be set in stone, but I think they are doing good work and trying to put a plan in place, and I don't want to be the part of that I don't want to hold that up. The momentum's great, so we want to be a part of that. So I think really that's the next step in our process here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, or
Members of the committee, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. That certainly is good news, the fact that we don't need to make a determination on whether or not what that facility would be used for the grade span, and whether or not it's used for a middle school or a high school, because that was my number one concern right now, and it's before seeing even a feasibility study, because I've already had this conversation with some people in town, is, did I hear you want to do what? Did I hear that the school committee wants to build a new high school? So I'm happy to hear that. I think, in all honesty, I think this town is about 10 years behind the 8 ball already, maybe even more, with keeping up with our buildings and renovating or building new buildings. So I think the time to act is now, especially if we have a long-term capital planning committee that's willing to listen to us and willing to make some priorities. I think it would be prudent for this committee to take some kind of action through a vote on what our priority is. For me, I think that does make the most sense after considering it, and after hearing what we heard tonight, that we would like to see a new building on Slocum Road, at the site of the current middle school. That's, for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents. And like I said, I think the time to act is now, because every year that goes by, the prices are not going down.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Dr. Jenkins?
Yeah, I would agree that the middle school is my priority. I'm also glad that we don't have to make a decision about what that is, but that building, it's just not a 21st century learning space. It's not. I mean, they do a great job with what they have, but we need to do that. My concern a little bit is seeing this, I'm thinking, whoa, this is really aggressive, right? And then I don't even have a sense of what the town priorities are and what the town is slotting in there. Have you had any conversations, right? Do you understand what they're prioritizing over this period, what they're talking about?
I do. So there's, without, sharing too much detail about other departments that I'm not the expert on, I can say that the water and sewer projects are a major component. They should be. I've been very encouraged by sort of the collegiality of the group in terms of being open-minded and not being siloed. I mean, I get it. Like, if we don't have good, clean water, or the toilets don't flush, okay, well, we can't have school anyway. So I get that, right? So, but there's some big projects on that end, not as big as what would be building a school, but sizable projects that are important for the town. So there's a lot of discussion of that. What I do think, and some of those are pressing, but I think they recognize that our projects are pressing as well. And I think that, if there's consensus tonight, bringing that back to them and kind of sharing our projected order of operations, we'll try and figure out how the town could approach that. I do think that we've sort of charted out debt and taken a look at what it might look like and what it might mean to the taxpayer. We've begun that process in that group. It's a super important part of the process. And I do think that the town has the ability to undertake multiple projects at one time. That it's not necessarily, okay, we've got to pay off the high school like we just did before we start the next project. I don't think that that's necessary. So, granted, some projects might be bigger than others. If we build a high school, okay, that's a very expensive project. The middle school is really expensive too, not as much, but I do think that there's going to be a way that we fit those projects together that hopefully might not be absolutely ideal for us, but it'll be something that we can live with. And I'll report back to the group as to once that starts to progress. But without prioritizing, it's a little hard for them to do that too.
Yeah, I guess my concern in asking that is that, right, there's always limited appetite among the voters for supporting overrides. And as we, like the first one or two, there might be more appetite, and then the further we get, and I worry we end up in a place where, well, the elementary school on that side of town is brand new, and the elementary school on this side of town is still, nearly 100 years old by the time we're at the end of it. So just thinking about sort of the politics of it, because we do ultimately, even if we're all convinced that the town can take on multiple projects, ultimately we have to convince the voters that the town can take on multiple projects. And so just thinking about, obviously water and sewer are a good example. Everyone wants their toilets to flush and, the water to run. But we should think about that in terms of particularly the timing too of, right, if we're all in agreement that middle school is first, right, second, third, and fourth are elementary schools. And, you're looking at a gap of 20, 25 years. Like, how does that work? And so I think, for me, it's clear that the middle school is up here. What falls down after that, I'm not really sure, except to say some rotation of elementary schools, right? Maybe a couple at a time makes more sense than one. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that is the most difficult challenge we face is, I think that the Quinn School would be done after the other two. However, how you decide which identical building built by with the same design, same architect, same contractor, same materials at the same time, you're going to replace first? That's a tough decision. That's why, as you can see on my options, I said building one, building two, and just...
Well,
I punted on that one.
Somebody got a point?
maybe we use the same footprint
Right.
for the schools again.
Maybe, and if we could get MSBA to buy into something like that, that would be fantastic.
Right. Other districts have.
Right. Yeah. It's possible. So those are things that, again, we need to be flexible and we need to be able to change the plan along the way somewhat.
Mr. Haynes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions, Mr. Kiley. On the timeline, the high school roof goes to MSBA in 2026. I'm gonna make an assumption that's just the paperwork to get their approval.
Yes, a statement of interest would be filed.
So we're looking at 27, 28 before we get the roof. So we're
We are.
still,
We've got to extend the life of this roof. We do. So I don't think I've talked to you about this, I don't think. I did some engineering work, not me
Yeah, you
personally.
did.
I hired an engineer. It would be pretty shoddy work if it was me. But I hired an engineer to do sort of a survey of the roof condition, highlight areas that we need to focus on. And they came back and said kind of what we knew, which is it's in rough shape. Lots of things need to be done to this roof, and they can't all be piecemeal little, $20,000 fixes. That's just not going to happen. So we have a challenge ahead of us.
okay.
It's going to be a rough stretch, but you're right. You're talking 28 probably before it's done, and that's if we'll submit a statement of interest. Is it a guarantee? I don't think it is. I think what we have going for us is we've not done an MSBA project in a little bit. We're trying to preserve a building that, although it wasn't an MSBA building, it's a fairly new building. So I think they'll take that into consideration. I think we have a real good shot at getting funded in the first year. But yeah, it's going to take a while. Going to take a while. We may need some more funding.
Chewing
Yeah, we may need some more funding. We've got a little bit of funding that the Finance Committee voted our way from their reserve fund for some some roof repairs. But yeah, it's not. We might have to do that every year. I really don't know.
Okay. Another question I have before I get to my options. If we get in and we end up with Slocum Road, but for whatever reason we end up with that as a middle school, what's in here? What does that do to this building? In the sense, besides the roof, can we get another 30, 40, 50 years out of this building?
I think we have to.
We would have to.
I think we have to, and I think we can.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we put as a positive, an advantage with option A, which we don't really have to do right now, but was that we could possibly have a state-of-the-art high school that instead of a 50-year-old high school at some point. Conceivably, by the time that building's done, this building will be 30 years old.
Yeah.
It's not a brand new school anymore. It just isn't. So that's something for the community to consider. But if we end up building a middle school, I hope you know that we're committed to maintaining the buildings, and as long as the town continues to support us through capital improvement projects, which other than this past year, they have been. So it's no secret we didn't get really anything funded last year. Outside of some flooring repairs. But as long as the town is committed to maintaining the buildings moving forward, then we'll do our best and keep this building in good shape, as good shape as we can anyway.
Overall, I think I agree with Chris and Shannon. I like option A type of deal. Fix Slocum Road. It moves everything, as we've talked about in previous meetings, there for athletics and fields and such. Kind of, in some instances, would be a little bit of money saving because we wouldn't have to have the buses transporting students hither and yonder type of deal. So, but I think that's the one that, again, you make it, early, mid-century, 21st century building. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you.
I agree. I think middle school should be first. And the fact that there's open space right next to the existing one makes it easier. I don't know how any of the middle schools would be easy, because they don't have a plot of land right next to them, and you can't just raise the building, and what do you do with the kids while you're building a new school? That we have to figure out. But I guess with Plan A, or plan of just making a new middle school, we have time to figure out what to do with the elementary schools. So an elementary school obviously costs a lot less than a middle or a high school. Is it conceivable to do more than one elementary school at a time, or is that just like, what do you do with the students?
Okay, so I'll give you an idea. So, well, first of all, to your first point, in terms of the piece of land, so we actually have some land that is developable right next to one of the elementary schools. So the DeMello School owns actually quite a bit of that property, is actually quite large behind that building. That could be a consideration. It's big enough to build a school, for sure. Potter School, not as much. It might be possible, though, to build an elementary school on that property. It would be tight, for sure. It would have to be really up and really on the back edge of that property, which might not be ideal, but that's something to consider. And the Quinn School, I don't know. It's 30 years from now, or 20 years from now. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out, I guess.
Sorry, Mr. Granfield.
But, in terms of doing more than one, so I think I'll mention that we were fortunate. We have a Dartmouth resident, a parent. His name is Nathan Silva. He works for a major contractor who, and he has a great deal of experience with building projects and school construction, and the business that he works for does some very major school construction projects. So he reached out to me quite a while ago, offered his assistance, provided some cost estimates based on our options, looking at that, including escalation costs and looking at it over timelines and everything. It's really, he did a lot of work, and we're super thankful. I think what we're talking about in terms of projects, though, it's pretty expensive. An elementary school might be $70 million in today's money. A high school might be $170 million. So, could you do multiple elementary schools at once? Well, it might cost less than doing a high school at some point. So I guess maybe you could, but we're going to have to look at how all of these projects work within the town's structure, what it would mean to the tax rate in terms of debt exclusion votes, and what it would mean to the taxpayers. So, we know that there's a lot to do there, and the town has that long-term capital group, which has really been working well, has done quite a bit of work looking at this. That we currently have a lot of capacity, and that we're not really paying for very much right now in terms of debt, since the high school was paid off a couple of years ago. So, it is time to start considering these projects, and whether you could do two at once, I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's something to at least talk about.
Quick, just dawned on. Does MSBA still have the model school program?
They do still have a model school, and they're also pushing energy efficient projects. So it's a good point in terms of MSBA. So we would be eligible around 50% reimbursement from MSBA. If you build a model school, you get extra reimbursement. So that's sort of a bit of a canned design. So it depends whether you can fit that on your site, whether it meets your needs. It can be scaled according to, enrollment and everything, but it's something to consider. You get a little extra money from MSBA, and they're also very actively pursuing energy efficiency initiatives through the MSBA, through in terms of using heat pumps to heat the buildings, and a variety of technologies that, are very very efficient, trying to get to net zero buildings, and so those, and you get extra money for those too.
Yeah.
So things to consider as we
That's what I
go.
was thinking.
So this is kind of maybe a crazy idea, and you can tell me that maybe it's a bad idea. But again, thinking about the politics of it and worrying about going back to the voters repeatedly for debt exclusions. Has anybody ever thought about doing just one capital override that we generate $10 million a year that goes into account? Every 5 years, we've got $50 million, right? That's if you figure out what the projects are and you figure out what that is, you only have to go to the voters once, right? And then the money that goes in there just goes into, whether it's a stabilization fund or whatnot, right? And it just goes, we just work through the projects. And I don't wonder whether maybe that's a better approach than having to every 5 years go to the voters and say, and now we want to and this just occurred to me after seeing Bess's reaction when you said $70 million for an elementary school, right? We can just say, oh, we're going to pull out of this account and we're going to pay $70 million. I mean, so it's something that I think is worth considering.
At least worth
Because we know that for the next, I don't know, it's not like 40 years from now all of a sudden we're like, okay, good. We don't ever have to replace a school again, and we don't need another water plant or a police station or whatever. Our capital needs continue, right? And whether it might be better for us to do a one-time push to get the money we need, because I just am sort of cynical about to keep going back every 5 years for another $50 million project.
Mm-hmm.
I can share that with the group. It's an interesting idea. The one thing I will say, and not to be a downer on that idea, because I'm not. I think it's interesting and might work well. In terms of votes, we will need to keep going back in terms of submitting statements of interest and voting the town meeting votes that are required to participate in the MSBA projects. We'll need all that too. That's
not
easier
to say, though, right?
Yeah.
When you say, look, we got
The
$100
money's
million
there,
in the bank,
right.
We're ready to go to MSBA
I agree.
now, right?
I agree.
So
Totally
I think that's
agree.
just a little bit easier
Yep.
way to approach it.
Yeah. I will share that with the group. We're meeting tomorrow via Zoom.
Okay.
Via Zoom, since
Everything's
Snow day.
closed.
Yeah.
Oh, the snow day, yeah. Anyone else before I?
No.
I agree with my colleagues. I think like leading from a place that really, looks at the age of the buildings. I do agree with the middle school is one at the top, but I wonder about any opportunity to sort of phase out Cushman School as a thinking about the age of that building. Is that in consideration? Is there anything that you could share?
I think that this is sort of, some of the options obviously illustrate that, closing of Cushman School. And I think that was part of my discussion, our discussion today with MSBA. And that would be included in our project intent, which I think would be an attractive sort of piece of that might lead to them being even more favorable. Okay, we're thinking creatively, we're closing a building that's outdated, that's small, that, isn't ideal, trying to be more efficient in that way. And, I think that leads to, are we looking at 5 through 8? Are we looking at a shift? Are we, some sort of different configuration? But those are things that we would do in that feasibility process with them, but I think that would certainly be a goal. And that could be done with the first project. We get one building built, we could accomplish that, so.
And so in meeting with them tomorrow, other than hearing our consensus, do you need an official vote, or you need for us to do anything more official?
I don't think you're voting for specific projects yet or anything. I think, I don't know, if you, I have enough information, I think, enough feedback to go back to them. It's fine. I appreciate it.
Perfect.
This was very productive.
Sounds good, yeah, definitely. Great. Thank you. I think, thank you for that. We're moving on to new business. So we have superintendent's update. I'll turn it over to
Okay,
Dr. Saban
Great.
McGuire.
So February is about to live up to its name. So we finally, and I finally, for the first time, get to announce a snow day. So I was going to wait for this evening to do that, but there seemed to be so much interested in it that we didn't want to keep people off because I know people were making plans. But I just want to make sure that people understand that we don't take decisions like this lightly. I mean, this is really an important decision to make, and it's not just one person's decision. The superintendent may get some accolades for making the decision, but really it's a team decision, including our own school folks here, Mr. Kiley talking with the town, DPW officials, other school-based folks across this region. I mean, I've been in touch with other superintendents all day long, and certainly community leaders, and it's always about the safety and security of our staff, our students, and our community. And so although we love to call a snow day, it really is serious business. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we do take it seriously. But congratulations, seniors, you get your snow day. Apparently that's a big deal here in Dartmouth. So a few items under teaching and learning that I just want to bring to your attention. And if you remember earlier, and I did bring this up in one of my school committee updates on a Friday, but we had publicly discussed chronic absenteeism, and that the commissioner was bringing that forward to the board. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that although we believe this is really important, the board did not approve the commissioner's recommendation. And so what that means is that chronic or absenteeism won't take on increased weight in our accountability standards moving forward. We're happy about that, but at the same time, I want to assure you and the public that student attendance is really important to us, and we're starting to have, not starting because I know this conversation has been had in this district before I ever got here, but really thinking about some strategic opportunities to re-engage students. So it's not so much about the punishment that students receive for absenteeism, but it's how we as a school district are considering what kinds of things are keeping our kids out of school beyond illness, which we of course want our families to keep our students home if they're ill. But there are other things that we need to be doing as a district, and I'm really pleased when I talk to the leaders and teachers in the district that is at the forefront of their mind. But we wanted to let you know that wasn't going to affect our accountability. Also, I wanted to bring up at the last school committee meeting, we talked about the need to explore curriculum resources. You've probably seen, and I might have even talked about it recently, on the news or the Globe. You've seen that Governor Healy has come out with an initiative around literacy. And one of the things that I think is really important for you to know is that here in this district, folks are already at this work. And so it's not the state coming in or DESE coming in to Dartmouth saying, we're going to force you to look at your curriculum resources. I know Bess and I have had this conversation, I think, since the minute I walked in the door here, and she as well had just started as a school committee member. We recognize that we have work to do around selecting resources and, even more importantly, putting this district on a path where it does, in fact, have a curriculum review cycle. And so I'm going to ask Ms. Paveo to come up to the microphone and talk about some of the work that she has been doing. And really, it's almost every day I see her with at least one curriculum team a day digging into this work.
Yes, we had our science group with us today. So I'm going to just first give you a little bit of an overview on a curriculum review cycle and the work that Mr. Tebow and I did with the Curriculum Council last year to develop this curriculum review cycle. Dr. Jenkins was part of this work, and so this should look familiar. First, what is a curriculum review cycle? And really, the importance is just that cyclical nature of looking at our curriculum in a way to revise it, to make sure that it's up to date. We know that things change. We want to make sure that we remain current with what we're doing. And it gives us the opportunity to make data-informed decisions about what the efficacy is of the curriculum materials that we're putting in front of our students every day. And so when we look at the elements of the curriculum review cycle, Obviously we want to make sure it's standards-based. And so as standards get updated, it's imperative that we also make sure that we're updating our curricular materials. The alignment piece, so it's kind of an ongoing joke, but not really, that anyone who works with me hears me talk sort of ad nauseum about horizontal and vertical alignment. We talk a lot about the journey that our kids take, right? It's not so much necessarily about just the grade level that you're teaching, but the journey that our kids are on, and making sure that there's alignment between what they're doing, let's just say in my world, in second grade with third grade, and there's that cohesion and that coherence that runs through the journey that the kids are on. The equity piece, we want to make sure that our curriculum resources are reviewed, make sure that there's no bias or cultural biases that are in our materials that we're putting in front of our kids. We look at the professional development needs. What are the needs of our educators to be able to not just give them a material, but have them be able to use it effectively and be able to use that tool to teach our kids. And Mr. Kiley, no offense that it's last on my list, but certainly there are budgetary implications, right? So we can't get into a place where we suddenly need to review all of the curriculum and replace all of the curriculum. So we need to do this in a cyclical nature and really have a budget and a plan for making sure that we're looking at that. And so I'm not going to ask you to look at this tiny little font. I'll go through very quickly. There are really 4 tenets of a curriculum review cycle. And you can really hop on anywhere, right? Because the point of it is that it's cyclical and that you can do these things. And as we're developing that, we're looking at our various curriculum areas and saying what makes sense with where we are right now. So just for, I'm a kind of linear person, I'll stop upper left. So when we talk about reviewing the curriculum really is when you're taking that deep dive, right? So we've had something in place, and now we're really taking a deep dive into what we're doing, making sure that there's alignment to our Mass State frameworks, making sure that that has that alignment vertically and horizontally across grade levels, making sure that it's not written, making sure that it's free of biases. Making sure that it's based on current research, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. Making sure that it's equitable to all students, so we're looking at the diversity piece of that, not just in the cultural biases piece of that, but also are our students able to access it? Do they have entry points regardless of sort of where they are of their learning styles? Is it equitable for all students in all learning styles? And then, we need to make sure that we have alignment with things that we do to measure our students, right? So our SATs, our ACTs, our MCAS, making sure that the things that we're doing, like I always say to my elementary folks, MCAS should never be the first time that these kids see something that looks like this, right? And so making sure that we're preparing kids for something that is a realistic part of their journey. Assessments, making sure that our assessments are telling us what we need them to tell us about how our students are learning. And so the outcome of that sort of first phase is, a report or a state of the affairs of that curriculum review. And then you may end up saying, we need to look at something new, or we need to write some revisions to this curriculum. It could be a great framework, and we just need to make some modifications to it. So regardless of what your decisions are, your next sort of phase in that would be to do that development or revision, right? So we're either going to be piloting something new or looking for something new, or we're going to be doing a kind of a deeper revision of what's in existence already. Once you do those things, right, we need to implement it. And we need to implement it with integrity and make sure that we are implementing the things that we're saying in the intent that they were intended to be done, right? And so then we get into that monitoring phase, and this is a multi-year phase where we're really looking at the data and making small shifts. We're looking at scope and sequence shifts, assessment shifts, and really throughout all of these phases, we're also very heavily focused on professional development. What are the needs of our teachers, whether they're new teachers, whether they're veteran teachers? Sometimes that looks very different. Sometimes it's programmatic professional development around the materials. Sometimes it's instructional practice professional development. So we're really looking at what the data is telling us our students need and providing PD around that. And so I'm going to make a little shift and say that when we're talking about current practices and making sure that we are doing what our kids need, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the science of reading. As Dr. Saban McGuire said, there's a lot to be said, heard, read, listened to around the science of reading, although it really is not something new. It has really come back around because it is a comprehensive body of research. It's a lot of years of research. And what it tells us is that there are 5 foundational skills to learning how to read. The bigger picture that we need to remember is that learning how to read is not reading as a whole, right? So we're really just talking about the foundational skills of reading, and these are the 5 tenets of that sort of foundational skills. We talk about phonemic awareness, and phonics, and fluency, and vocab, and comprehension. And if you don't live in our world and use those words every day, as I know many people do not, this is what that means. So phonemic awareness, when we're talking about reading, it begins far before you ever talk about your eyes on a page. We're talking about being able to discern sounds and manipulate sounds. And so this is a real early foundational skill, but we need kids to be able to articulate and hear different sounds in a word, so that when you hear the word bat, you know that there's a b and an a and a t in there. And then we move forward and learn that there are letters that come together to make those sounds, and sometimes 2 letters come together to make a new sound. And so those are sort of all those core things that kids are doing before they're ever really reading, or if they're having struggles in their reading that we're looking at deficits have come up along the way. Fluency is just that sort of smoothness, automaticity, being able to read so that students can understand what they're reading. So it's that sort of muscle memory that you can do things without ever thinking about them, right? Like sometimes you drive home, or you think you're supposed to go to the store, and suddenly you find yourself in your driveway, right? Because you're not really thinking about having to do that, so your brain knows how to do it automatically. That's that sort of piece about you can lift the load of decoding and trying to figure out the words and really give yourself that opportunity to understand what you're reading. Vocabulary, right? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Building the repertoire of our kids' vernacular, making sure that they have words that they can use and they understand. And vocabulary has a direct link to knowledge base, to knowledge and comprehension, understanding. And there's a lot of research around just building our kids' knowledge base, right? And so I, again, am such a nerd about this stuff, but I'm like, the neuroscience behind how you learn is your brain is forever trying to make connections. Anytime you give anyone, new information, your brain instantly goes to work trying to connect it to things that you already know, right? And so we have to put things into kids that they already know and understand. And that's, a big part of what happens here. And so, foundational reading skills, how do we measure those? Well, the Commonwealth has come along and really helped out in that and said, you're going to do it. And so they have a early literacy screening guide that was passed in July of this year. And so this is the guidance that came out. The guidance says we have to assess kids at least twice per year using a valid, developmentally appropriate, DESE-approved literacy instrument. And then for students who are identified as not meeting the benchmark, we need to inform parents of that and have a plan for what to do with the kids. But there is good news in Dartmouth Public Schools. We have already been doing that. So we use the Dibbles 8th edition to do some screening of our kiddos, and we were already doing that. And we actually do it 3 times a year in Dartmouth. We do a beginning, middle, and end of the year benchmark. And for kids who are not meeting the benchmark, we do a progress monitoring between. So our students who are identified as struggling readers are being benchmarked 5 times a year in the area that we have concerns about, which works out to about every 6 to 8 weeks, which is a great RTI cycle. So we're looking at our kids, we're looking at their data, we're looking at what they're telling us. So DIBELS stands for Dynamic Indicator of Basic Early Literacy Skills. It tests 4 of those 5. What DIBELS does not address is vocabulary, but it addresses 4 of those other 5 basic skills of reading that are identified through the science of reading. And these are the grades in which they are assessed. So you heard me talking about that phonemic awareness piece. That's like a real basic foundational skill. We're testing our kids in K and 1 in phonemic awareness. Phonics, we're testing them all the way through 3rd grade. reading fluency, we don't actually look at kids' oral reading fluency until around the middle of first grade because we're still teaching them to learn how to read. That word reading fluency piece, though, is words on a page, right? So it's to build up some of that automaticity so that we can get them to be fluid readers. And then the reading comprehension, we test in grades 2 and 3. Now, we certainly test their comprehension in other ways, but in DIBELS, we're looking at grades 2 and 3. They do a maze, which is actually I gave you a little information about what each of those subtests looks like, if you really wanted to see it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those and what we have been doing over the last year. And so when we were talking about the data and talking about what do our kids need, the group of kids in front of us, we need to remember, are some of the kids who had a very different early childhood experience. Our current 4th graders are kids who went home in March of kindergarten and had a very different first grade year than any other kid would have, right? So play that forwards and backwards. Our 3rd graders, if they were in our preschool, went home and had a very different kindergarten experience. And so we know in looking at some of our data that our kids were really struggling with some of those foundational skills. And so what we did is we graciously went to Mr. Kiley and I said, I really need some money. And we were able to figure that out. And we were able to get the Foundations. Foundations is a phonics-based program. If you've heard ever of Wilson Intervention, it is based out of Wilson. They're sort of the gurus of foundational reading intervention. And we were able to put that into all of our classrooms. So we had a group of teachers who piloted this last year in K-3. All of our classrooms this year in K-2 implemented it. One of the things, again, going back to that curriculum review cycle, you learn from your pilot was that a 3rd grade implementation is a very difficult thing for something that's very dependent on kids learning the basics of it in K1 and 2. And so we actually had our teachers go to some training with Wilson, and the recommendation was that you hold the 3rd grade for a year, let the kids get some of those foundational skills under their belt, and then they can really fly with it in 3rd grade. And so what I've done, it's important to note that our kindergarten DIBEL schedule is a little bit delayed. So our beginning of the year kindergartners, our introduction to school is certainly not one that we want to say, welcome, now come with me and I'm going to give you a test on something that you maybe have heard before, but maybe not. And so we try to get, 6 weeks of instruction under their belt before we start looking at kids. We don't want to over-identify, we don't want to under-identify. We want to make sure that the data we're collecting is accurate. So what I've done is put together some information about our kids in grades 1 through 3. So if you go back to the tests, there are 4 subtests that are kids in grades 1 through 3. And I wanted to look at what does it look like this year compared to last year. So we're talking about just not even a year, right? We're talking about 6 months of good, solid Tier 1 instruction. And so we looked at middle of the year benchmarking last year and middle of the year benchmarking this year. And at first glance, you might look at it and say, it doesn't really look so different. But I think the other thing that you need to remember is that typically there's an implementation dip. When you start a new program, that the kids are all trying to get on board and you have to sort of bridge that gap from what they've been doing before to what they've been doing now. And so I look at this data and I go, well, overall, we had 65% of kids at or above the benchmark before, and now we have 66. And so they're shuffling out a little bit different. That can mean a couple of things, right? These are different cohorts of kids. So this is an average of the 1 to 3 last year and an average of 1 to 3 this year. So the cohort is a little bit different, but we're making moves that we want to see. We have less kids in the well below. We have more kids at the benchmark. We took a little dip in the above benchmark piece, but in the overall at or above, we're trending in the right direction. That's true, again, when we're talking about our nonsense word fluency. So nonsense word fluency is we give kids made-up words, right? And so we're not dependent on their ability to memorize a word. We're giving them a word that is not a real one, and they have to really depend on those foundational skills of knowing, being able to segment words into their sections, know the sounds of those sections, and be able to come up with it. And so we do that at the phoneme level or the piece of the word level. We do it at the full word level. And again, you'll see this was a great one. Our kids at the benchmark, again, we're moving in the right direction. Word reading fluency is the ability to read those words at a singular level. Again, that at or above number is trending in the right direction. And our oral reading fluency, we're right there is where we were last year. And so, I think the connection to this is that we have to continually look at the data and what the data is telling us about the efficacy of the programming in front of us. And then if we need to make moves, making sure that we're putting high quality research-based materials in the hands of our educators, giving them the professional development that they need to be able to execute it well, and then continually looking at how our kids are doing, making small shifts where necessary, making big shifts where necessary. And so, what we have done is we addressed the foundational reading skills, which we knew was a huge deficit post-pandemic. These are, like I said, kids who just didn't learn how to read in the way that we know kids need to learn how to read. And so we had to address that. And so in the longer term, we are looking at our overall ELA programming. We have 4 curriculum teams that you've heard me talk about before. Our ELA team met with 2 publishing companies the week before last. They have a couple more coming in next month. And then we'll be looking at making some decisions and anxiously also listening to what happens at the state level on what they're thinking about as far as literacy curriculum, because they have a lot to say about it, which will be great as long as they attach funding to what they have to say, because that tends to sometimes be the case. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, no questions, but I'm really happy you're doing this, and I look forward to seeing the next round of tests and how our students are developing and hopefully catching on.
Yeah.
So I'll just say thanks. I think the presentation is super useful. I mean, I think people sometimes think, well, I learned how to read, like how different is it? They don't understand that what we know about how kids learn to read is continually changing and updating. And so to hear about sort of our understanding, like I know I would probably do really bad at the made up words test, because I'm like, my kid would come home and be like, how do you break these words up? And I'd be like, I don't know, like I just know the word. So I think it's, breaking it down and focusing on that makes our students better than perhaps we are, but it's not as transparent because they're just learning to read. That's what they see it. So I think it's super helpful for people to see these different components of that, and I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Mr. Mays.
This is great, thank you. And it's interesting that Dibbles is still around.
Still around, 8th edition.
Huh?
8th edition.
But, I mean, I can, and again, I can remember it, being talked about.
Yeah.
And such, but this is excellent. I'm, and not that I'm looking for a kindergarten or first grader to have a lot of home, but, do they take sheets home for mom and dad, the guardian, to sit down with them to try and decipher some of them?
I think the biggest thing that we can do is create a literature-rich environment for our kids, right? And so reading to your children when they're learning how to read has so much power in that ability to build vocabulary, to build content knowledge, and then also it's time spent, right? And so if you can create a joy of reading, I would tell kindergarten and first grade parents, and typically at the elementary level, the expectation for homework is that you're going to do some kind of reading at home. It can be reading with an adult, it can be reading to an adult. There's a lot of benefit in reading things that you might consider. You look at your child and say, well, that's too easy for you now. No, there's so much benefit in building their fluency and their ability. So I would tell my kids, read to the dog, read to your dolls, read to your little brother or sister, right? Like reading in general, in any way, shape, or form, will have tremendous benefit for your kids. And it doesn't need to be a worksheet necessarily. It doesn't need to be something that they're pencil to paper. Just creating a really literature-rich environment for your kids is truly the best thing that you can do.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great presentation, Katie. And no, I certainly appreciate the work that you're doing along with Mr. Tebow and the rest of the staff in the district. I look forward to seeing where we go from here.
Yeah.
Thanks. We appreciate your support.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this. I really, in particular, selfishly, really love the focus and the curriculum cycle to those on-ramps for those students who learn differently. And also selfishly sort of being kind of close to those, audiobooks, or I remember one of my kiddos early on, participating in counting how much time in the summer they were reading, and it really was all of the things that we were able to help them access to be part of that, whether it be audio, whether it be thumbing through magazines and pointing to pictures and communicating in just alternate ways. So I really love the focus to those on-ramps for all of our learners. The good news is we're already doing it with the Dibbles. But that added component, which I completely understand and am in support of, but I'm just wondering your thoughts. I'm looking over there, to parents receiving, because that, yes, we would have parent-teacher conferences. We would talk through, the struggles that we have on those individual basis. If teachers are able to identify through the way that we're doing it when a student is not to the level that they think they should be. What has been the response to parents receiving that official sort of 30-day documentation saying your student is not meeting the
Thank
level?
you for bringing that up. So that part of it is new for us, right? So we do a lot of assessing of our kids, and we gather a lot of information about them. The new piece to that, right, is that requirement to be in contact with parents to say your child is struggling. And so I don't love the idea of only contacting parents when your child is struggling. And so we made the decision to contact all parents about how their students were doing. And the other thing I don't love is when a parent finds out when they receive a report card or that's when their child is struggling. That should never be the first idea that you have. And so, because it's done pretty early in the year, sometimes before parent-teacher conferences, the timing of it for kindergarten worked out great because we could give the letter to all of our families at parent-teacher conferences. But the 30-day requirement didn't allow us to do that for our older kids. So we built time into their day for a phone conversation for any student who was getting a letter that said that your child is below the benchmark. And so a conversation with a family is so important, because the other thing to remember that Dibbles, like all of our assessments, is one snapshot. And so that conversation with a teacher who really has been doing work with a student could sound something like, you're going to get a letter that says that your child didn't do so great on this. I read with her every day, and I want you to know that this isn't reflective of what I see from your child, and this is what we're doing, and this is right. Or this, you're going to get a letter today, and it might seem a little bit concerning, but I want you to know this is what we already have in place. Your child might be seeing a reading specialist. They may be doing some tier 2 instruction with me in the classroom. So the other part of the requirement that's great is to have a plan. And so, it would be one thing if we were communicating and saying, just want you to know they're not doing so hot, but not have a plan for it. But to be able to say, this is what we're doing in response to that, and make sure that parents, and I think it softens the blow when you get that letter, because this is, let's be clear, this is dyslexia guidelines, right? And so you're getting a letter that says your child may be at a higher risk for dyslexia, and what parent wants to get that letter? Certainly without context, it's terrible. And so, we provided some time for our teachers to be able to have that conversation and provide the context, but also what they see on the everyday basis, not just on these 1-minute subtests that they're doing with these students.
Excellent. Of course, you already had a plan for that. Thank you for explaining it for the public, but and for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I just want to say, again, been leading great work before I got here. One of the things that I was really excited about was when I finally got to Dartmouth, that Foundations was in place, because that was something that I was committed to in my prior district. And also, which you didn't mention, but Haggerty is also another aspect of a resource that you have brought into the Dartmouth schools to help support, again, around the science of reading. And I want to just also mention the curriculum review cycle, because it's really not unlike the capital improvement, the long-term planning for capital improvement. So if you're on a cycle, we don't get to this point, as Katie pointed out, that we need resources in every single content area, and that becomes really expensive. But if we budget for it over time and it's connected to a cycle, then it's almost like what you said, Dr. Jenkins, earlier, we're banking, right? So we know that money's there, it's there in the budget every year, and we're able to make decisions based on something that we have in place. Supposedly, and I'm believing this might be true, is that there is going to be funding attached to this. And the thing, again, that I feel really confident about in Dartmouth is that we're so well poised that whatever it is that's eventually released, that we'll be right at the front of the line, ready to move on a resource. And again, Katie's been doing a lot of work with a lot of your educators in the school district, plenty of teacher voice. So important, so thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
So you know my favorite thing to talk about is entry planning. That's why I invited Ross up here to help me with it. So part of what I want to help us to do and help me to do really, as I'm still saying, still your new superintendent, as I'm moving out of the entry phase into strategic planning. We're not going to really be digging deep into strategic planning until we have collected all of the information that we started really way back in July or April, really. We have partnered with Teaching Learning Alliance. I think I mentioned that at a prior meeting, and they're going to be helping us they're going to be facilitating this process. And one of the reasons for that was that we all, meaning the entire team here, including some of yourselves, want to be part of the process and not necessarily directing the process, because we want to be part of the teams that are doing this work. And so Mr. Thibault's going to talk about our next steps.
Thank you, Dr. Saber-Maguire. So our strategic planning, actually, you can pick where you want to kind of put a pin to say we started. I know Katie and I talk about this all the time, but on March 11th, which was a Wednesday of 2020, the district strategic planning team actually met in the community room at Quinn. And then on Friday, March 13th, 2020, we know the whole world shut down. So if that's the point you want to pick as a starting point, that would be fine. But last year, really, in 2022-2023 school year, we started partnering with Envision Learning to really develop our portrait of a learner. And the portrait of a learner, for folks who might not be familiar with it, it's basically a promise from Dartmouth Public Schools to the community. This is what you can expect your, the students in the district to be working on a daily basis as they're with us. Some districts call it a portrait of a graduate or a vision of a graduate. We made a purposeful decision as a strategic planning team to call it the portrait of a learner, because we wanted to be applicable to students pre-K through 12 in our district, and we really wanted to serve as that North Star that would eventually guide our district strategic planning work. And so as Dr. Saber-Maguire said, we're now at that point where we have a draft portrait of a learner. We presented it to our educators in the early release day in January to collect feedback from them. And again, one of the things that's so important to strategic planning work and to the development of our portrait of a learner is input from all stakeholders within the community. And so last year, when we started this work, what we really did was ask every single educator to kind of create a prototype. If it was up to them in small teams, what would the portrait of a learner look like for them at their level? And it was from that the strategic planning team really developed our portrait of a learner. In addition to that, we surveyed all of the stakeholders in the community, parents and families and caregivers, elected officials received a survey from us. Students at the high school level were part of that as well. And of course, our educators were surveyed and actually developed their own prototypes. So it was a very inclusive process, and that strategic planning team spent all of last school year really synthesizing all of that data and all of that information and put it together. And so now We're shifting from partnering with Envision Learning, which helped us with that work, and they're a nationwide national consultant group that does this work around Portrait of a Learner. But we're shifting and partnering with the Teaching and Learning Alliance now, which is a consultant group in Massachusetts, made up of recently serving superintendents or assistant superintendents. They've worked with over 80 districts across the Commonwealth, and I think in some other states across the nation as well, to do various types of educational leadership work, strategic planning work, et cetera. So we're going to be expanding that core team. The district strategic planning team has consisted of representation from each building in the district, including central office. So there's been administrators and either coaches or teacher representatives from each building, but we're going to look to branch out and to include, a couple of folks from the school committee, Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, also families and parents. We're going to look to increase our educator representation on that team as well, because now we're really shifting to the intense work of moving from a poster for the Portrait of a Learner to our practice. What do we need to do to go from that poster to actually living it every single day so that every single student of ours has that experience? And that's going to happen fairly quickly, which is exciting because it seems at times it seems like we're moving very slowly, even though the work takes time. And so I'm glad we've moved at the pace that we have, because I think we've done some really great work. But over the course of the spring and then into the fall, we're going to put together a plan that really that's presented to the school committee for approval, and it will really address how we're going to move from poster to practice. And the end game is, once it is approved by the school committee, that the Teaching and Learning Alliance will produce a professionally designed, print-ready strategic plan for the next 5 years that's going to really drive the work in this district, along with a data dashboard that can be used to monitor our progress as we achieve the goals and the initiatives that we set forth in that plan, and communicate that out to the public as well, so that it's fully transparent and everyone knows exactly how progress is being made. I just wanted to share, because I talked about the Portrait of a Learner. Ignore the graphic. The graphic here is not what the final graphic will be. This is a placeholder graphic. Our Unified Arts students at the high school are actually taking these competencies and branding it and designing it to reflect Dartmouth. And so the idea was that some communities will just have a graphic designer do it for them. We wanted our students to have a hand in owning this, because it's ultimately about them. And so we met with Christine McPhee, our Unified Arts lead teacher here at the high school. She's working with the teachers in her department and the students, and they're actually in the process as we speak of creating several designs that will be considered in terms of the graphical representation. But these are the 5 competencies that were identified by stakeholders within the community as being important to our Portrait of a Learner. And they are critical thinker and problem solver, communicator, continuous learner, contributing citizen, and collaborator. And these are the skills and competencies that we said every effective learner needs to employ at some point. And again, pre-K through 12. What you don't see is the actual work that took so long, which is these are all very well defined and broken out by grade level. So it goes pre-K through 2, and for each of these competencies, there's definition and performance outcomes that go with them. So from pre-K through 2, what does an effective communicator look like? And it's all laid out. And then for grades 3 through 5, what does that communicator look like? 6 through 8, and then 9 through 12. And that's done for each of these competencies. And again, that was done through a series of meetings throughout the course of last school year, where a very talented group of educators really looked through and had good discussion around what are the skills that go into being an effective communicator, and what do they look like at each grade level, and so on and so forth. And that's what was presented to all educators in the district earlier in January, as I talked about, to get feedback, because the planning team created it, but we wanted educator feedback as well. So, to make sure it was going to be a document that is useful to all teachers and all students in the district. This is our core team as of today. So this is the team that I said we'd be adding to. And I just want to kind of acknowledge there are some folks who either from retirement or left the district who contributed to the work. It started with Dr. Gifford, obviously retired, and so Dr. Saber McGuire jumped right in there. Same Laurie Jodwin was part of it, Bill Garcia, and Will Higgins, all contributed significantly to that portrait of our learner draft. And of course, these folks who are listed here on the screen are still very much part of the work. And so we appreciate their hard work. A lot of hours of work and good discussion have kind of gone into it. And I think we're in a very good position to add to the team, like I said, with members from the school committee, select board, FinCom, parents and guardians, caregivers, and some students as well. So we're excited to do that. We're excited to continue the work. And part of what the Teaching and Learning Alliance is going to do for us is to facilitate focus groups, to continue to bring input into our process. And so one opportunity to be part of such a focus group is going to occur at the Superintendent's Family Forum, which is going to be held here on March 6th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. All members of the Central Office Leadership Team will be on hand, talk about different topics. We hope we'll get a large turnout of family members, community members who want to meet Dr. Saber McGuire if they haven't already, or meet other members of our Central Office Leadership Team, hear about some of the exciting work going on, and perhaps most importantly, take advantage of the opportunity to share their voice to help us prioritize the work of the district moving forward.
Just to build off of that, I want to make sure that we're clear that we are not jumping into strategic planning without first reporting out to the school committee and the public on what our entry findings are. Because the entry findings should and will inform the strategic planning process. And so that is something that we're working on. And part of this superintendent's family forum is meant to gather more information from the public. So this will be sort of a combined effort where we get a chance to, and we've talked about this really since September, having this opportunity to meet with families, so we'll do that, and you can see the topics will include school budget, teaching and learning, student services, technology, and more. And then we'll hand part of this meeting off, as Mr. Thibault was saying, to the folks, the facilitators from Teaching Learning Alliance, who will then be able to work with this family forum to gather information that will again go into our report on entry findings. So there won't be any actual strategic steps for strategic planning until we complete our report on entry findings, because the findings are critical to informing what comes next with our work. I also just wanted to mention the stakeholder groups are critically important. As a matter of fact, we have a group this week.
Yes. Yeah. So this week, our middle school and high school students will be meeting with representatives from TLA on Thursday afternoon, and that will be the first opportunity, as Dr. Saber McGuire said, to continue to collect stakeholder input that will inform the strategic planning process. But again, it's a group of middle school students and high school students, and then later on in a week or a couple of weeks after vacation, I believe the elementary school students will have the opportunity as well. And then eventually our staff, faculty and staff will have an opportunity to meet with representatives from TLA, family and parents, community members, and then there will be, for anyone who can't come in person, there will be a virtual opportunity to do so as well, that TLA will host, to be able to, really reach anyone in the community who wants to be part of this work. Will have an opportunity to do so. So.
Any questions?
Fantastic, nice.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.
Appreciate it.
So how are we advertising the Family Forum?
That's a great question.
And in particular, I mean, I think it would be easy to reach out to families, but what about community? How are we going to engage the community in that?
So part of the way that we'll advertise the Family Forum is through our weekly backpack. That's one way. But we also realize that not everybody probably looks in the weekly backpack on a weekly basis. So this will be something that we also will do a call through Parent Square, so a text. So we'll give the community, as far as the community is concerned, though, we have Dartmouth Week. I think somebody from Dartmouth Week was here earlier.
Yeah, he is up in the
They
corner.
are?
Yeah, so we'll be counting on their help as they help us with advertising and promoting a lot that's happening here in the Dartmouth schools. And so that's another way we'll get the word out to the community.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Or you know I have a couple more things.
Yeah, I'm
So
just
I'll be
thinking
quick.
in terms of the Family Forum, the CPAC, Special Ed Parent Advisory Council, is scheduled for a workshop the following week, but I'm thinking it might be very fruitful to advertise this as an opportunity to advise the school district, that's the point, for this purpose, and leading this to be our meeting or directing families to this forum in lieu of, so we're willing to be flexible, and I think that's a great idea to offer families a real opportunity to have an
great.
impact.
That's a great
Yeah.
that's a great suggestion.
Okay.
And I see Miss Denise over there nodding her head yes, so, and Mrs. Redland. So, yep, we'll make sure that happens. I'll get that word out. So just a couple other quick updates. I always have to talk about personnel and HR. We are going to be advertising for the position of early childhood director. We spoke about that today. We're hoping to do that in probably early to mid-March. That's when these types of positions are generally advertised, and we think that'll give us the time we need to be able to attract a qualified candidate pool. I always have to say, I'm going to say it, educator specialists, educator, ESPs, educator support.
Professionals.
Thank you so much. All right. And then always substitutes. And so, again, Katie and Ross have taken over the interviewing of substitutes for the district, and I think that's helped to promote a smoother process for getting people in and getting them out into the schools as soon as possible. And, of course, Kate doesn't like to be thanked, but I always have to thank her because she really does so much work on making sure that we get our candidates that we get their paperwork done and that we get them out into schools as soon as we possibly can. But then, we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. This is always my favorite part, to continue to just talk to you in the community about the wonderful accomplishments of your Dartmouth students. This past week, I had the opportunity to watch the girls' basketball game this past Friday night. They had their second victory over Bridgewater Raynham, which is apparently an anomaly here in Dartmouth. And with that win, they secured their first ever league championship. And so that's a really big deal to them. I could see how excited they were and the celebration that took place with that win. And we're going to be looking forward to seeing what happens next. So they completed a perfect conference record. They were 8-0 in their conference and 16-1 overall. So that's pretty exciting news to see where the girls' basketball team goes next. At the same time this game was happening, I was able to pop in and see what was a double session of the 6th through high school strings section of the orchestra. And so that was directed by Heather Church and Mike Daniels, and they did have apparently nationally and internationally renowned musician here who was working directly with the students. It was really exciting to see. I have to say it was incredibly impressive, and the first time that I've had the opportunity to see that part of the orchestra at work. And your 6th graders, unbelievable when I heard that they had just started in January to play some of the pieces that they expertly played. So it was like, you're going to really literally an orchestra concert right here in Dartmouth in the middle of or the beginning of February. The DHS boys and girls indoor track teams both earned second place finishes at last Tuesday's indoor championships. I didn't get a chance to see them yet because they're playing in, they compete in Boston, so perhaps we can talk about that at some point and try to figure out how to get them closer to home. But definitely many combined and individual efforts. I got to meet with all of the captains of the sports teams, and the track team was really well represented. So you can tell that there is genuine commitment to that sport here in Dartmouth. So I also want to mention the hockey team continues to pile up some wins. They started off a little slow, but it looks like they really put things together. But beyond sports, there are some public-facing that are all public-facing, and they certainly get quite a bit of attention in the Dartmouth Week. But I do want to thank the Dartmouth Week for offering sort of a two-page, I think, spread on what's happening in the Dartmouth schools. And what's so incredibly impressive about it, it's all written by our students. And I don't think you'd know that unless you read the opening paragraph describing what this particular spread was about. So lots of great things in here, a couple things that I've learned. I also got to participate in a podcast with the students who are running your school newspaper, and let me tell you, they didn't lob any softball questions. It was really challenging, and one of the things that I'm so impressed about, because just last week I met with, speaking of the roof, a group of sophomores. So 4 sophomores who are doing a civics project about the high school roof. And they had some excellent questions. The report that Mr. Kiley had a group come in, I had it in my hand. It's about this thick. And I have to tell you, it's page after page of problems. There was nothing in it that said, this part of your roof is in excellent shape. So lots of photographs to go with it. But back to meeting with the students, they asked excellent questions. They're really interested. Mr. Kiley and I are going to take them up on the roof at some point because he offered to take me up on the roof to see where all these problems are. And so we invited them along. But really thoughtful questions, thoughtful kids. And again, the podcast was so incredibly impressive, so professional. And Mr. Higgins does a great job leading those students. And I think that's important to close on, thinking about all of the wonderful adults that are so committed to kids in this community, because that's how they're getting all of these, are being exposed to all of these wonderful opportunities in the community of Dartmouth. There's so much more to talk about. I know the boys' basketball game maybe just ended. Oh, they're up 12, so that's exciting news. So we hope that they're going to also be victorious this evening. But great stuff happening, so we should all be celebrating those kinds of things because that is the commitment that the community has to its schools. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before, I really don't have much. Does anybody else have anything to contribute? Mr. Nunes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to real quickly follow up on Dr. Saber McGuire talking about our student athletes, and the Standard Times is getting caught up with their last year spring and this year fall student athletes and such, and we've had a couple of our athletes make that the awards and such, so just congratulations to them. I know I briefly touched on it last month, but Saturday, March 2nd, starting at noontime here, the Music Association is going to be hosting a NESBA show, both color guard and percussion, starting at 12 noon. Our JV is on, the JV's color guard goes on at 12:45. The varsity goes on at 5 o'clock, and awards will be right after that. And then we'll kick into the percussion, and Dartmouth is scheduled at the moment to be on at 8:50 with awards right after. So in the next couple of days, I'll get an email out to everybody looking for presenters for the trophies. And again, you know, the times that they're there. I realize it's a long day and such, but If you're able to help out, we would appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Anyone else? The only thing I have really is just, I started talking about this. I was approached by a community member, and then I did see this end up a conversation on social media. But I just wanted to mention it because I know we have a policy around naming facilities, and I just couldn't occasion the exact process that I believe it's through. If anyone has such a, there are policies around how that is determined and the fairness and the outreach to other interested parties. I keep looking at Mr. Nunes just as your historical, but
Yeah, I was also contacted
Okay.
by community members. Well, I didn't see anything on social media, but I
Yeah.
was contacted by a community member.
yeah. So they would. Does it start through the superintendent's office, or is it just
It
intent?
starts with like a letter of interest to the superintendent. They come before the committee. Here's what they want. Here's what they would like to do. And you put a group together to filter the potential honorees and such, and then and there's a whole policy on that.
Yeah, I have it
And
in front of me.
that type of deal, and certain things, looking for a wow factor
Yeah.
and such. And then, and then they come up with a recommendation, and it comes back to us.
Okay.
The deal.
Great.
That's
So that's
the
how
Reader's
I'll
Digest
respond.
version.
Yeah, no. Because I know it's sort of
helpful.
like, open it up for other folks who might have a different thought around how to approach a certain building, or in the part about seeing it on social media, which is, I didn't really read, but it looked like there might be someone else already named after a particular space, so lots to consider. So thank you I just wanted to bring it up.
I mean, and what's there at that point, as I said, you may have to try and, somebody's going to have to do some legwork to.
So it's a process.
That process.
Yeah.
It's not, I think that's important. It's not as easy as saying.
It's not cut and dry.
Right,
Yeah.
it is not. It
Yeah.
is a process, and it's a community process,
Yep.
and there needs to be a lot of involvement in that, and ultimately, the committee does make that
Yeah.
kind of decision.
Yeah, I do remember we started out with those discussions. A staff member came to us about, and it took
Mr.
Coach
Gaspar,
Gaspar,
yeah.
naming the court after
Yeah.
honoring him. And so that took a lot of community involvement, and I wasn't on that committee, but
Yeah.
others were, and that was really meaningful. So I just wanted to bring that up because it was brought to my attention by a constituent. Yeah, great. I have nothing else, and so, and I don't have my agenda in front of me.
Next meeting is March 11th.
March 11th, 6 p.m. here at the Dartmouth High School
that time, say
Library Media Center, with the live stream, of course. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Nunes, second by Ms. Coughlin. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy snow day,
I know,
everybody.
yeah.
Yes.
That too.